All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. I forgot to put my countdown clock up there. Oh, what an embarrassment. It just says countdown to Halitics, but we don't have the time, and I think it works anyway. I think it's just sort of making it clear we're going to be going on live any moment, and indeed we are. So hope you stuck with me, even without seeing that countdown clock, and hope you'll join me today, 240-242-5646. I've been getting some heat online, people saying, oh, you've got no audience, and it's kind of true. It kind of sucks. I mean, I really want to be talking to thousands of people, not maybe a few dozen, and those of you who do stick with me, I so appreciate you, but we got to get, because honestly, and I don't mean to sound, well, I guess it does sound kind of pompous, but who else does this? We're built, the goal. Anyway, let me say it this way. The goal here is to build a truly progressive, some would say leftist movement. We don't have that in America. There are a few glimmers. There are a few green shoots. And we're going to actually hear from one of my good friends on social media anyway, David Cobb, and his thoughts. But basically, even with all of the solace, all the heartache, all the angst that the Democratic Party establishment leadership should be going through because they're so unpopular, they're despised. I mean, just think of it this way. People hate Democrats more than they hate Republicans. They do, and it's totally understandable because of the fakery, the pokery, the fakery-pokery, the old fakeroo, the switcheroo, the Democrats pretending to be on your side, pretending to be a progressive party, and every time you turn your back, even every time you turn you avert your gaze, they pull the rug out from under poor, struggling, and working people. So, of course, we're going to view them as fundamentally dishonest people, untrustworthy people. Trump is a little more blatantly obvious in his, I guess, corruption and everything. I mean, I don't think we look at Trump and think he is lying. It's true. He lies. I don't quite know what the difference is. I think it's that there's at least Trump claims, it seems, that the raw, naked capitalism that he champions will benefit Americans. We know it's not true. We know he doesn't care about Americans, but he says, this is what I support. This is what I'm going to do. Democrats claim they're on your side, and yet over and over, they aren't. So I don't know. I'm still working that out in my mind. I did call today's program, Don't Fall for the Fake. Dems Still Stink. And the reason I called it that is because we're seeing from some Democrats at least performative gestures in which they separate themselves slightly from AIPAC, slightly from Israel. And I'm saying that ain't good enough. That doesn't really bespeak. It doesn't reflect any kind of meaningful change in policy. The only way we're going to get policy change in Washington, the only way we can perhaps recover, rebuild our democracy is by abandoning the Democratic Party, by embracing the Green Party and other non-duopoly candidates. I'm thinking particularly of Shama Sawant in Washington State. In addition to the Greens I've talked about frequently here, Butch Ware in California, and of course, Andy Ellis, friend of Halitics, been on this program before. 240-242-5646. Would love to talk to you about any of this. The news from Gaza gets worse. This is the thing. The Democrats are like, yeah, there's a turning point. I hear this from Democratic organizers, progressive organizers. Hey, we got more co-signers on Bernie's bill to block the bomb than we've ever gotten before. And you didn't block the bombs. I can almost guarantee you that if it really were possible that the Democratic sponsors, the pro-peace Democrats, to the extent there are any, let's just assume maybe Bernie is, maybe AOC really cares about the Palestinian people to the point where they're willing to put their their actual careers on the line. I don't think we've seen that they don't. We've seen that clearly. But let's just say they're willing to accept some level of discomfort for people who are being genocided. If they were able to leverage whatever moral compass their majority of legislators have into perhaps supporting a bill that would hurt Israel, that would call out Israel, if they were able to leverage enough moral authority to perhaps change Congress's mind to a degree, there would be an all-out revolt, and you wouldn't see it. You would see so much pressure brought to bear on the Democrats that they would fold, as they do over and over and over again. All right, 123 dead in the last 24 hours in Gaza City. So the numbers keep going up despite these apparently successful efforts by the Democrats to recruit more folks. I did put out a request for calls. I got one. I'm so glad to talk to you, Stephanie. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you? It's good to have you back.
Thank you so much. You're such a great listener and supporter. I could not appreciate you more, Stephanie. Thank you.
So I missed Monday and Tuesday because I know you were back on Monday. So I don't know if you have yet featured Pete Buttigieg's horrendous Pod Save America interview.
Yeah, I had that in the queue, and I was going to talk about that Monday, Stephanie. Well, the short answer is no, I haven't yet played it. What happened Monday was the Trump takeover of the district, at least temporarily, and I just put my energies into discussing that. So I have not gotten to the Buttigieg clip, but I can play part of it if you like, or just go ahead and describe it. I don't know if it's essential that I play it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you should play part of it. I just want to say again, this is both apropos of your Democrats still suck topic and of the thing I was on the last time I called you about how much Pete sucks. I have never heard someone say so much nothing, like even worse than Kamala when she was being handled for the election. And actually, I compare him unfavorably to Kamala because I do believe that there is some there with Kamala. I just think it was handled out of her. Maybe I'm naive, but with Pete, there is no there again. Like, there's no soul. He betrayed Bernie, who apparently he at one time had high regard for. He is doing this careerist thing. It's obvious that he's running for president. It's obvious that Democratic power brokers are kind of like testing him out there. They've got him making the rounds of all these podcasts. And the clips from the Pod Save America podcast specifically related to questions about Gaza should be absolutely disqualifying. Like, absolutely, definitively, this man is an empty suit, and he's obviously placating AIPAC, and he has no compass, no moral compass at all. So,
it's awful. You're absolutely right, 100%. I'll just, the other point I'll make on this, I have a clip queued up. I wasn't going to play necessarily Buttigieg today, but I will for you because you brought it up, and I appreciate that. But Marjorie Taylor Greene speaks with a moral clarity on this issue that no Democrat can approach. And to me, that is a very powerful argument in favor of abandoning the Democrats, not embracing Republicans. Well, if there's a good Republican out there, a good Democrat, right? I mean, I'm not saying you don't vote for Mamdani. Yes, vote for Mamdani. But we've got to recognize that these parties exercise tremendous power over their members, and they're not. I think we expect too much from people to expect them to buck their leaders and to buck the people who put them where they are. In terms of money. And that's why we need to embrace Democrats. But what do you think is the meaning of Marjorie Taylor Greene? What are the implications of her actual, truly, I think, inspiring criticism of Israel and even fellow Republicans like Randy Fine?
I have heard about it. I have not heard it out of the mouth of the source. So I don't know that I am educated enough on her talking points to really comment meaningfully, except to say that I've heard about it, right? And
well, you know what? I'm going to interrupt you because I'm going to, instead of playing Pete, I'm going to play Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is 1 minute from her podcast appearance with Matt Gaetz from just a couple days ago. Here we go.
We got to talk about AIPAC attacking you, sending out fundraising emails saying that you are not acting in the interests of our country. Marjorie Taylor Greene, your reaction to AIPAC's fundraising emails attacking you?
Yeah, Matt, I'll go ahead and be straight and honest about this. I'm absolutely furious. And as a matter of fact, AIPAC needs to register as a foreign lobbyist because they're breaking U.S. laws by donating to members of Congress and by taking them on a fully funded trip to Israel every single freshman member of Congress's year. They just took them over just recently and had them meet with the Prime Minister of Israel. But let's frame that correctly. They take them over to meet with the secular government of nuclear-armed Israel. Israel, who is in less than $400 billion in debt. Israel, who has taxpayer-funded health care and college. Israel is not hurting, and they've already proven that they are more than capable of not only defending themselves, but annihilating their enemies to the point of genocide. And that's what's happening in Gaza. And Matt.
All right, so I'm going to stop it there, Stephanie, but I mean, I don't know what more we could ask for from any representative. She calls out AIPAC. She calls out Congress for going on those boondoggles to Israel, and she calls it a genocide, what Israel's doing. So, I mean, what does that tell you?
I mean, it's about policy, right? Like this is what I tell people when I go to vote in the primaries, and they're like, no, that person can't win. I'm like, when it comes to the primaries, and I know this is a topic for today, I vote based on policy. So along that line, I hope that all Democrats would make, or at least the ones that voted with Bernie, right, on stopping sending military aid to Israel, I would hope that all Democrats would make common cause with Marjorie Taylor Greene on this issue. I don't think just because someone, she is associated with a lot of odious individuals, of whom Matt Gaetz is one, who have a lot of odious positions. However, I don't believe in that kind of ad hominem, decision making, like excluding someone because 90% of the time you disagree with them. And I think that the best legislators and the people we think of having been able to do things in a bipartisan way have evidenced the fact that, hey, yeah, we can disagree on most things, but if we're together on this thing, let's move forward together, because the fact that we're moving forward together as a bipartisan force is powerful. And I think it will only embolden Republicans to be willing to break with their majority on these topics, to reward, not even a reward, because you're not doing it for reward. You should be doing it because it's the right position, right? But to be willing to make common cause with Marjorie Taylor Greene because she's right on this issue. And I think that's definitely the case. I want to just quickly address your issue about abandoning the Democratic Party versus going with the Greens or another party. I remain perpetually torn on that, because obviously I'm way more philosophically aligned with the Green Party platform than with the Democratic Party platform perennially. But I also see and maybe you have to convince me or someone has to convince me, I also have been made to believe that it is impossible in the relatively near term for us to win running green, unless it's really hyper-local, like really hyper-local races maybe where, like the shoe leather, going door to door, talking to people might overcome that inherent partisan loyalty problem that we have, as well as the structural barriers both parties have thrown up to third parties. But the problem is that I'm always willing to agitate against the Democrats in the run-up to an election, and then almost invariably cave, with the exception of when I felt I could afford not to cave and vote for the Democrats.
Right. That's exactly right. I'm glad you said that, because so often when they do vote the way we want them to, it's when it doesn't matter. It's either it's a meaningless gesture. It's not actually impactful. And we even saw back in 21 when both of us, I think, were doing work with our revolution that the progressive bloc there, the squad, ultimately folded and voted in support of the, let's get it, Build Back Better, rather than, standing firm on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Or maybe it was the other way around. They folded on Build Back Better and voted yes on bipartisan infrastructure. And that was a real cave. Unfortunately, I think I got the wrong. It was Biff before, I don't know, who knows? I can't remember the thing, but whatever it is, they went the wrong way on it. And we've seen this over and over, Stephanie. I would just ask you this. When you have an election between Trump and Harris, now, again, if you have a decent Democrat, someone who's pretty progressive, who you sort of trust, like I probably would have voted for Elizabeth Warren. I don't like Elizabeth Warren particularly, but I would have voted for her. I would have voted for Chris Van Hollen if they had run against Trump. But if you have somebody of the ilk of Harris, I know you said you think she's not as bad as a Pete, but what do you get if you do elect them? I mean, don't we continue to spiral down the toilet regardless?
It's absolutely a fair point, and I think the answer is yes to your question, and I think that we continue to spiral. I think that what we can hope for is if they're particularly brave, like let's say Kamala said a lot of nothing through the whole, after she was given the nomination, basically she said a lot of nothing. And I don't really think she believes in nothing, but I could be wrong. But like, I've watched her long enough to have hope that there's something underneath of that handling, that there are actually some true, more progressive beliefs than your standard Democrat. But you didn't see any evidence of it during the campaign. So you raise a very good question as to what would have actually happened if she had ascended to office. What could we have expected? More tacking to the center and placating, what Obama did, throwing roses at the Republicans on a daily basis, trying to get them to cooperate while kicking the left, right? So that's exactly what Obama did. Is that what Kamala would do? I don't know. I think the best we could hope for is that she would be brave enough to stake out an area, let's say, for example, healthcare, where she would be willing to push forward, let's say, a public option, and that we would be left with incremental movement in one area and essentially centrist everything across the board, the rest of the stuff. And is that good enough? No, it's not good enough. But I guess my question back to you is, why do you think we could actually win with a Green Party candidate? And I mean, I love Bruce Ware, so let's talk about him. But like, why do you think we could actually win with a Green Party candidate? How? And if you think we can't, what is the benefit of kneecapping and undermining the Democrats disproportionately? I'm not saying we would get none of the right-wing vote, because I think there is this sort of, disaffected Appalachian white, blue-collar white people who we might be able to siphon off to some extent. But there's no doubt that we would draw more of the progressive Democratic vote than the Republican vote. So what would be the benefit in that kneecapping if we can't win? And if we can win, tell me why you think we can win.
All right. Well, a couple of thoughts on that. Interestingly, you brought up the Appalachian voter who chose Trump over Harris because they felt that Harris offered them nothing and Trump offers them tariffs, and, at least expresses some understanding, perhaps arguably, about their economic plight. I think that's true. I mean, we saw Bernie go into West Virginia, and he gets a lot of love. So I think there's no question there are white working class, and for now, Black and Latino working class Republican voters who would embrace a true populist, a Democratic or progressive populist. I don't think there's any question about that. So I agree with you there. That doesn't mean they'll vote for a Green Party candidate. So your question then is, well, how do we get them to vote for Butch Ware, for Jill Stein? I think it's really tough. I that's part of why I do this, is to try to build support for candidates like that. I think it's really tough. I think some of the positions that they take are alienating to working class voters, both Ware and Stein certainly embraced identity politics to a significant degree. I think both embrace reparations. That's a divisive policy. I don't think that's an ideal policy to embrace if you want to win general elections. I note that in Seattle, Shama Sawant is not running on a platform of reparations. She does talk about addressing challenges facing certain communities and providing redress for communities that have been specifically harmed by policy, by government policy. But she does that geographically rather than based on race or other factors. I think that's a more, to my way of thinking, a better approach if you want to win elections. I would vote for Greens because they're not, even though I don't agree with them on everything, I agree with them far more than I agree with either Democrats or Republicans, and I agree with them. And also, they're not compromised, as far as I can tell, by money. What do we get out of that? Well, I just think that the biggest answer I have is we don't get anything out of supporting Democrats. We get nothing. We keep seeing our country get worse and worse. We see life in this world for poor, struggling, working people become ever more intolerable. We see genocide. We see ecocide. So I think my best answer is voting for Greens, supporting Greens may not get us anything, but it's the only thing that could work, whereas everything else doesn't work. And then I would say, that's why I do this. I'm trying to get people, right? I mean, when I say to people like Robert Reich, who doesn't listen to me, I don't think he even knows I exist, but people like Reich and Hartman, who have big audiences, who are influencers, you could move the dial. Why don't you try? Why aren't you talking about alternative candidates? I think for them to say it won't make a difference is so phony and disingenuous. They actually are leaders, in this movement with ultimately millions of people who may not follow them. I don't think Hartman has millions, but Reich certainly does in his list. I mean, why aren't they? Well, let's pressure the influencers to become more green.
I think they're afraid. I think, again, it comes back to, so I'm just going to hearken to a conversation we had. I think that this is where your deontological philosophy and my primarily deontological but slightly tinged with utilitarian philosophies diverge, because you're basically saying we're voting for stuff we don't want when we vote for Democrats, and we're voting for only more of the same and continued degradation of our world and our politics. Whereas I'm saying, it might be slightly less bad with the Democrats. So to my mind, the goal of Vote Green is to pull the Democrats to the left. And that's kind of, only because, or to better increase the chances of progressives being able to overtake the Democratic Party in the nearer term, because I think in the long term, I'm not confident about our ability to pull anything off at the congressional level or above, maybe below at the state level, state legislatures. It's an open question. I think, your thinking on it is defensible morally, and mine is probably too, and it's a question of making it pragmatically possible. So anyway, thank you.
We both want the same thing, that no question. And this is what I was talking to Arlen about yesterday. And Arlen even has expressed, Arlen is more centrist than I am, but he's expressed willingness to vote for, I just want to make sure you were hearing me. For a second, I thought I might have been muted, but I'm not. Arlen's said I'll vote for Greens under certain circumstances. So it's not a complete washout. I can't remember, I looked up deontological, and I guess it's the question of, is there some sort of a moral, explain that really, if you can, a thumbnail real quick, Stephanie, and then I have one more point I want to make to you, and then I'll let you go unless you have a final word, but ontological and deontological.
Yeah. So deontological basically are moral absolutists, right? It is, you don't vote for policies you don't want. And when you vote for a Democrat, you get policies you don't want. And not only that, policies that end up, contributing but parenthetically, since this is moral philosophy, contributing to the continued destruction of the planet, lack of human rights, erosion of democracy, all of the things that we see happening that happen a little more slowly with Democrats, perhaps. I mean, it's sort of like I have the image in my mind of Republicans, flooring it to drive the car into the brick wall, and Democrats just saying, let's slow down a little bit, but we're still headed towards the brick wall. So, as a deontologist, a moral absolutist, you would say, no, you can in no way vote for anybody who's going to keep us headed toward a brick wall. We need someone who's going to try to turn the car around, or at least stand on turning the car around. And that would be a Green or a progressive independent or someone, but no way you should vote for people who are just going to keep us headed towards the wall. Whereas someone who's utilitarian, but who agrees with your outcomes, like your desired outcomes, might say, but if we hand the wheels of the car over to the Republicans, they're going to just accelerate us going into the wall. Whereas if we hand them over to the Democrats, even we don't want to head towards that wall, we have a better chance because we have a little more of a runway to turn the car away from headed towards the wall. So, there's, what you're basically saying is from a moral absolutist position, you just don't support things that are going to continue in this bad direction. And from a utilitarian perspective, you're like, well, maybe under some circumstances you do. And kind of along the lines with that, I voted Green every election where I could vote Green without affecting the outcome of it's a presidential level. I voted for Stein in Maryland in 2016. But now I'm out in Virginia, and it's a different situation. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe one of the, I actually don't think we should. I think there are times when you do let the bad, what does Obama say? Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think sometimes you do let the bad be the enemy of the even. You do let the worse be the enemy of the bad. In other words, you say, okay, Trump is so awful, I'm going to vote for somebody that I really don't like. And that would have been my position if Kamala Harris had simply spoken out against the genocide. I disagree with her on pretty much every issue. I don't believe she is. I have not seen any decency in her. So you and I are different that way, because you said you saw decency in her. Maybe it's there. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying personally, I have not seen it in her. But if she had said, hey, politically, and if I believe she was just purely a political animal, she looked at the tea leaves and she said, hey, I want to be president. I don't give a rat's fat butt about a million Palestinian babies mean nothing to me. I don't care. But I'm going to commit to end our support for Israel because I want to be president. And if she did that, and I believed her, that she wasn't doing it for good reason, she couldn't care less, she's an amoral person, which I believe she is. I believe she's a sociopath with zero redeeming qualities. That's how I see her. But I wouldn't care. If I was convinced she was going to stop the genocide, I would have voted for her, even though I disagree with her on every single other issue. So, but she didn't even give me that. So it wasn't a question of, well, is she worse than Trump? It was that on an issue that I think is that important, she was just as bad.
Acknowledged.
So, I mean, I get where you're coming from. I could be wrong on this, though, because I definitely could have been wrong, because I look at what Trump's doing now, where he's completely indifferent to the genocide. He's stepped up, the 2,000-pound bombs. So maybe I doped that out wrong. It's hard for me to say, but I can't. Yeah. I'm not going to beat myself up because Harris just refused to give pro-life people even a bone. So I don't know what to do with it. I have no answers. That's why I don't know what to say. That's why I'm glad you called. Before I let you go, just real quick, I put on the screen, Stephanie, Mamdani is actually ahead in New York City among conservatives of both Cuomo and Eric Adams. So Yes, a true, unabashed progressive to leftist candidate who campaigns on populist issues like Mamdani, they can get a significant percentage of even self-described conservatives to support them.
You want me to comment on that?
Yeah, please.
I think I suspect that that's the George Will effect. I don't know. I saw an outtake of George Will being interviewed by Bill Maher, and he was saying, every once in a while we need to let them have a socialist so that we can then attack that person and show them why they don't want socialists. So I'm going to be pessimistic seeing that support from conservatives and say that they're trying to get him elected so they can then turn around and attack him and turn him into something, a symbol of something, like a great demon of some kind. But I'm really happy to see that it looks like he's going to walk away with this thing. And I'm really happy to see how, we've seen that the emperor of Andrew Cuomo has no clothes, and how all, people are talking about how horrible he is. And I'm excited that he's going to be the mayor. And it seems like that train is going now and it won't be stopped. And I'm not drawing much comfort from conservatives supporting him because I think it's for the wrong reasons.
All right. Well, Stephanie, thanks so much for the call. Super appreciated. Always love to hear from you. Thank you and best for the rest of the day.
Bye.
All right. There she goes. There's Stephanie. And of course, that opens up the line. We just have one. People always say, oh, it opens up a line. We have just the one line. So call us now, 240-242-5646, 242-5646 if you want to join me. Oh, yeah, don't forget, let me show the subscribe now button. There it is, if I can play it for you. Yeah, please do subscribe. Well, there it is. Now we got it up there. And also on Facebook, love to want more. Yeah, you can get more Halitics 24/7 on Facebook. So that's another option. And always like us whenever you get an opportunity. Any video, if you're watching, please do like. Please comment. The comments really help us get cut through the algorithm as well. Any interaction with our videos is a real plus. I do want to respond to what Stephanie said about why conservatives might support Mamdani. And she's thinking it's kind of let's elect someone that we can, tank. We can bring them down. We can make the conservative movement look really good by destroying a leftist. And I mean, Stephanie's super smart. She might be right about that. I see it a little differently. I don't think their motives are I'd take any vote for any reason if it's my candidate. I think the bigger reason that Mamdani is second among conservatives after Sliwa, the guardian angel, is because he's running against two really loathsome people. I mean, people who are clearly corrupt, people who are clearly dishonest, people who are hypocrites, meaning Cuomo and Eric Adams. So I don't think it's necessarily such an embrace of Mamdani as it is a repudiation of the two candidates that the Democratic Party establishment has embraced and wants, to win. I think that's what we're seeing in the polling there. I would also note one other thing. I think traditional Republicans, they're less policy focused. So they may say they're conservative, but what they mean by that is they want someone who they view as plain spoken, who's going to call a spade, as they would say it. And that's why Bernie has a significant amount of support among self-described conservatives, because they believe is honest. They believe tells them what his truth is, even if they don't always agree with it. And I think that is a very appealing trait to all of us, right? And also it's an appealing trait to it works for Mamdani in this election cycle in New York. So I think that is the explanation I favor for why Mamdani is doing well, at least relatively, among conservative voters. And I don't see how at this point, it would seem odd if he loses. If he does lose, I'm going to say it's rigged. I'm going to say my initial reaction is this was a rigged race, that the corporate elites, the establishment, the Democratic leadership in the city and in the country said we cannot have this guy win. I took the position, I said this before, I said I think maybe I asked for too much from Democrats, right? I expect them to repudiate their leadership. It's not enough to simply not go. This is why I say it's not. It's why I say they still stink, because it's not enough not to go to Israel, which I'm really glad Sarah Elfreth, for example, from Maryland, two Democratic Maryland first person, I guess. I don't want to say freshmen, first term, two Democratic first term representatives in the House, Sarah Elfreth and April Delaney, did not join the majority of first term Democrats who were on this AIPAC trip to Israel, which is designed, to foster kind of appreciation of Israel and give a nice, expensive, all expense paid luxury trip and present Israeli Hasbara to Democrats and, kind of just smooth them down. And also we heard from Matt Gaetz to maybe get some dirt on these people, right? He had somebody snooping around in his hotel room, so that may be part of it as well. So you see all those Dems there. I don't know if you can read the names: Johnny O, Luis Rivas from California. So they're all over the map, all over this country. All these Democrats taking the AIPAC trip, and again, I do worry. Yeah, you do have to worry what they're trying to get on these people. See if I can get you a bigger screen so you can see all of them, and all the money too that it's enormous. It's enormous how much AIPAC has given these people. These are first term, I believe, first term, because you don't see Steny Hoyer was there, but you don't see him. So I don't know who Nellie Pooh is from New Jersey, Tim Kennedy from New York. Wesley Bell, they spent almost $13 million to defeat Cori Bush. Unbelievable. Missouri, $12.768 million AIPAC spent. Luz Rivas, I said Luis. Luz Rivas from California. Johnny O, progressive so-called, from Maryland. Gil Cisneros. Pete Aguilar, Brad Schneider getting a ton of money. He's from Illinois. Laura Gillen. So that's the Democrats who went to Israel as part of this AIPAC funded Let's All Embrace Israel. So I'm glad Sarah Elfreth, who was I think she got about 4 million, right? So if she was on that chart, she would have been just after Wes Bell, the Missourian who took out Cori Bush, in terms of the support received from AIPAC. Elfreth would have been number 2, and she didn't go. So she's getting some love in progressive spaces for doing this, or at least some praise. We should thank her for not going. I'm not going to give her any praise. I'm really not. I mean, to me, this is all performative. Even if you go to Israel, it's performative. I don't want you to go. I think it's wrong. But votes are what matter. And not only votes, but also leading a movement. A lot of times the votes don't matter. A lot of times the votes are just, you're said, hey, you can vote against this and you can go back to your constituents and say, see, I took the AIPAC money, but I'm not in their pocket. Well, I'm in their pocket, but I'm not their puppet, right? So I took their money. It's in my pocket. I'm in their pocket, but they're not pulling my strings. But in a real sense, they are. This is a vote that doesn't matter. We don't need your vote. This isn't that important to us that you vote with us on this issue. So I don't give her any credit. I just will not do it. Now, the Sun, in its reportage, they do talk to Elfreth, and I might have been willing to give her some credit if she had spoken out against AIPAC, if she had spoken out against Israel, and most importantly, if she had taken on her fellow Democrats. Did you hear, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she didn't go after Republicans. I wish she had. She did acknowledge that that Republicans take AIPAC money, but she was more focused on Democrats who do it. But she has gone after Republicans. She has violated Ronald Reagan's law, thou shalt not, the first commandment, thou shalt not speak ill of your fellow Republicans. She has. She absolutely has. She's spoken ill of Fox personalities like Mark Levin, truly odious people like him. That's what I want from my Democrats. If you want my support, you've got to be willing to call out the corruption in your party. Sarah Elfreth didn't do that. She didn't say, well, I'm not going to go to Israel because Israel's a genocidal state and none of my colleagues, none of my fellow Democrats should have gone too. She's not going to do that. She won't do that. She didn't do that. She couldn't comment. Well, that's meaningless too. That's nothing. That's a nothing burger. That does nothing for me. Not just Elfreth had no comment, but there were others. For example, April Delaney. Frederick County, this is Maryland, Frederick County, Maryland Democrat in Congress, was scheduled like Elfreth to go. But she finally decided not to. No reason given. None. She just decided she wasn't going to go. But she didn't want to be in that picture. She knew it looked bad. She didn't want to give people a reason not to vote for her or to campaign against her. I'm not going to give people credit for that. I want you to lead a movement. I want you to vote along with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I want you to embrace anti-Israel, anti-Zionist leadership and become part of that. Now, I get that's really tough. Very few people will do that. Marjorie Taylor Greene may be the only one that I'm aware of. Maybe I don't know, Bernie won't call it a genocide, what Israel's doing. He won't do that. You heard what Stephanie had to say about Pete, how terrible he is on this issue. And he's the Democratic leader when it comes to the 2028 nomination for president. Mamdani has spoken out against Israel, and he's been completely, he's been ostracized from the party. They won't endorse him. And probably, I'm getting it's too much to ask for, to expect or to demand Democrats abandon their fellow Democrats. We do see that happen, of course. They've abandoned Mamdani. But the squad, whatever you want to call them, they're not going to do it. And maybe I'm asking for too much from them. My answer is, okay, don't. But don't expect our votes. That's why we're going to vote green. That's why we abandon you. That's why you cannot expect progressive support. You cannot expect leftist support because you aren't prepared to take on your own party. Here's an explanation from a person familiar with the trip. I just will not give them credit for this. I think they still stink. Those who didn't go. One person familiar with the trip said they weren't surprised by the dropouts, Delaney, Elfreth, saying that Israel-Gaza is a messaging tightrope. So it's a messaging tightrope. It's not about a moral imperative, which is what you heard from Taylor Greene, right? Well, they're committing a genocide, and we have hungry Americans, and we're giving them millions, billions of dollars. Isn't there something wrong with that? Isn't there something immoral about that? Isn't there something evil about that? That's not the issue for Democrats. It's just a messaging tightrope. Well, we want to be in tune with our district's feelings, but we don't want to be opposed to one of America's closest allies. Really, we just don't want to alienate deep-pocketed donors who make it clear that if they don't support us, if we don't support Israel, they're going to fund a primary challenge or fund a Republican challenge in the general. That's why. And of course, the person familiar isn't going to say that. But that is. But even if you accept their framing, the person familiar with the trip who says the reason Democrats may back out is, but they're not going to be clear about why. They're not going to say, well, we have a problem with Israel because they don't want to be too opposed to one of America's close allies. Why are they our ally? That's like saying Nazi Germany's our ally. There's no defense. It's not a defense to say, well, Israel's our ally, so it's okay. So therefore, I'm not going to speak out against them. They shouldn't be our ally. There's zero legitimacy to the genocidal Israeli state being an ally. We have got to figure out how together. And somebody says it's going to be really hard. I don't know how can we build a Green Party? We can't do it. I think as long as we say we can't do it, we can't do it. But as soon as we start saying, yes, we can. People said you can't elect a black president. We did. Now, I'm not saying it worked out so great, but I think there was a basic fundamental sense in this country that a black man or woman could not become president. And obviously that was false because Barack Obama did become president. He was elected president. He was a popular president. Lots and lots of white people voted for Barack Obama. White people who, by the way, also some of them voted for Donald Trump. So the idea that we can't elect a green seems to me kind of runs up against that same idea. Well, we can't elect a black person. We can elect a black person, we can elect a green person. Yes, you're running up against all the institutions, all the institutional power. I can't see any argument against, honestly, completely embracing the Greens. Now, I want to be clear. Before I show you this, actually, I wanted to. One of my Facebook friends posted this. I'm going to show this, and I criticized it. I'm thinking, am I a hypocrite for doing this? So this was posted. To whomever, I didn't identify who they are. To whomever, if you're friends with them, you know who they are. To whomever put this sign on the telephone pole in my neighborhood, good job. Can we please be friends? So they're praising the sign, the sticker that says, you voted for the orange Antichrist, obviously Trump. What will you say on Judgment Day? So I have a problem with that. I do. And I'll show before I get to the more specifics what my response was, because I think it pretty much clarifies why I have a problem with that. And I say it. My problem with the sticker is that it could easily be understood to imply that voting for Harris is not a comparable sin that must also be answered on the day of judgment. So my problem with that sticker is it singles out the Trump voter. The vote for Trump is some kind of mortal sin, right? You've got to answer for it. You've got to say, well, how did you got to justify voting for Trump. And I think that's true. So I can't say it's in and of itself a false statement. Trump is that awful. How can you possibly? It was a mortal sin. You've got to come up with some justification for it. But if we're going to do that, if we're going to play that game, then don't we have to also recognize that the other Republican candidate was also a genocider, a warmonger, an ecocider? I don't see how you can get around that. Now, here's why I think that I'm being a hypocrite. Maybe. Because I spend so much more time on this program going, I don't know, I haven't counted it up. And Monday's show was a big exception because I focused on Trump and his fascist takeover of D.C., although it's hopefully temporary and he'll have to move out at some point, and it's performative like a lot of stuff he does, but it's still ugly and wrong and fascistic. I spend most of the time in this program beating up Democrats. I spend very little time, some time, on Republicans. And if I do that, then you might be able to say, well, listen, Hal, you say it's wrong for me to spend a lot of time bashing Republicans and that it's kind of misleading and it's disproportionate because the Democrats are that bad. Yet you spend a disproportionate amount of time going after Democrats. And I guess that's fair. I don't know what to say. I think it's fair. I can come up with some explanations for it. I think the biggest reason is I tend to be talking to what I believe are progressives, people who share my view ultimately of the world, that we need a world where everyone has enough and no one has too much. And the Republican Party clearly, unabashedly doesn't stand for that world. Trump does not believe in a world where everyone has enough and no one has too much. He believes in a world where he has more than everybody else. And he embraces the billionaire class. Democrats do that too. But there's lip service in the Democratic Party to some kind of equity and equality that you don't see in the Republican Party. So I think my positions, my actual moral values, are much more closely aligned with people who vote Democrat, many people who vote Democrat, but not all. So that's part of the reason. I want those people who vote for Democrats, I want to convince them, because of what I believe deeply in my heart. The people you're voting for are making things worse, given what you want. You know, they're, in terms of what you want in this world, the Obamas, the Clintons, the Bidens, the Kamala Harris is, the Amy Klobuchars, the Pete Buttigiegs, they're against what you want, just like Trump is against. But everyone knows Trump is against what you want. With maybe, again, I think, you know, there's certain exceptions, but bottom line, he's really bad. Everyone knows that. On the left, we get it. But I'm saying, but so are those Democrats that you may have voted for. So let's go somewhere else. Let's find some alternative. But I also think the message, we need a world where everyone has enough and no one has too much, does resonate with many Republican voters, the Bernie voters, the working class, blue collar Republicans who are like, well, I'm getting screwed regardless of who's in power, but at least Trump is talking about tariffs that will bring jobs back. At least Trump, and also reduce my tax burden, because the tariff payments go to the U.S. Treasury and therefore will reduce the burden of taxation on me. So there's that argument. There's also the argument of, hey, Trump is saying we shouldn't be in Ukraine, that this is a huge waste of money and money that we need at home. So that argument that I make, we need a world where all have enough and none have too much, will resonate with some Republican voters. And those Republican voters will appreciate very much my argument that the Democrats are really bad too, because they've come to that conclusion. They've said, yeah, I may not love Trump. Trump may not be very good, but the Democrats are worse. So when they hear me slam the Democrats, they think, well, Hal's kind of got it a little bit. He's getting it. He's listening. He sees things. He's a straight shooter. He's not partisan. He's not a Democratic hack. So that's my justification for spending a lot more time bashing Democrats than Republicans. I wanted to get into a couple of other points here. Well, in terms of just to make the Republicans are really bad on Israel. So we're talking about Democratic, fresh, first-termers visiting Israel and how bad that is, and how, Israel may be getting something on them like they tried to get on Gates, as he described in his video. And I'm going to play the Buttigieg clip tomorrow about Israel as well. But I wanted to just share this real quick. Republicans are awful too. You can't, it's not enough. It's not okay to say, well, Hal, you made a point, the Democrats suck, so I'm going to vote Republican. No, that's not my argument. So there you go. A number of Republicans have also made the trek to Israel. Mike Johnson visited last week. And another group of Republicans are going over there. And then they point out, yeah, conservatives are not without their infighting either about Israel Gaza. But one difference is that the few Republicans, Taylor Greene, Thomas Massie, who have spoken out against Israel have been far more, I believe, clear as to what is so terribly wrong in Israel. Although Ilhan Omar, I think, has been good. I guess she's called it a genocide. Rashida Tlaib has called it a genocide. She's been the best. So there you go. Couple of Democrats, couple of Republicans, and that's about it. We're on the right side of these issues. Correct. Wanted to just address, this was something we talked about yesterday with Arlen, was the Fareed Zakaria piece where he has an encomium to free trade in the Washington Post. And I said some nice things about Fareed Zakaria. I do think he's a good writer. I think he's obviously a very good reporter. I did not know until I did a little bit more research that this guy is he's a real neolib. He really believes in free trade. He totally opposes tariffs and other restrictions on the flow of goods and services between countries. And so he has that bias. That's his preference. And, he has some statistics that seem to support the notion that free trade hasn't been bad for America. I disagree strongly with that. I certainly think it's been very bad for poor, struggling, working class Americans. And that's a huge reason for the rise of Trump. That's why we have Trump, because both parties have embraced. Remember, Trump ran against the Republican establishment in 2016. He took on Cruz, the senator from Goldman Sachs, right? I mean, Ted Cruz is as much a corporatist neo-lib as any, I don't know, as a Chuck Schumer. Maybe he's even worse. As a Pritzker, right? Pritzker's the Hyatt scion of the Hyatt hotel chain. Well, Ted Cruz is a former Goldman Sachs guy. So is, I think, who one of the Republicans worked for? I guess it was Trump's first vice president, Pence. I think Pence was a J.P. Morgan Chase executive. Trump ran against the Republican elites in 2016 with his tariffs, with his anti-elite rhetoric, his populist rhetoric, just as he ran against Hillary, who was also obviously an elitist. So we have Trump. We have to thank, I think, even more than the neocons. Trump ran against them too. He said the war, and he rightly excoriated the politicians who supported the war on the people of Iraq. Zakaria, will not acknowledge the terrible, with it's a nod, but to the terrible destabilization wrought by free trade. And he does present some facts that would suggest that it hasn't been all bad, and maybe it hasn't. He notes here the median disposable household income in America was higher than in all but one advanced industrial economy as of 2021. And that's true. That's a true fact. Now, I don't know if it's somewhat misleading because the world is recovering from COVID, so there may have been different recovery schedules. But COVID hit U.S. really badly, in part because of Trump's bad policies. So there's no reason to think that we would have recovered, our recovery from COVID would have pushed us further ahead of those other countries, Switzerland, Germany, Britain, and Japan. Yeah, we are doing better in terms of GDP. We are the big kahuna. We are the most powerful economy in the world. So that's a true fact. And it is true that the median income here is higher than in those other countries. Now, partly I think that's due to also natural resources. The U.S. is an extremely wealthy country in terms of natural resources. We have all the oil that countries in Europe and Japan don't have. We have incredibly fertile land. So our agriculture is super productive. And that's not due to anything about our economic system. It's just the fact that the U.S. has been, this geographical area is extremely wealthy in certain ways. So I don't, to a significant degree, I believe our wealthier status vis-a-vis other developed nations isn't anything that we do, anything that's because of our something inherent in the American economy or economic structures or people being better than other people. It's just that we're luckier, right? Geography is destiny. And that's a big reason. But here's another reason why our median household income is much higher than in other developed nations, than our kind of peer nations. And I didn't think of this yesterday, but I was really trying to come up with, what would explain this? Why is our economy generating more money per household and per individual too? Because it's not just that American families have more than, say, German families, but American workers take home more, even though blue-collar workers in America have seen their wages, if anything, decline in the past 52 years. Well, another reason, we just work harder. Americans are doing more second and third jobs. Americans are doing more overtime if they're lucky enough to be in a position where they get paid overtime. That doesn't reflect a stronger economy. That doesn't reflect an economy that's benefiting from free trade. That reflects desperate people who need to work to keep up with an ever more expensive economy. And that would be my final point. It's not just, with respect to the Zakaria, it's not just that Americans, have more money and they're working harder because we work harder, we're more industrious or something of that nature. Also, our costs have just skyrocketed in housing. I'm not clear exactly. They talk about Americans have more disposable income. I'm not sure how they factor in housing is supposed to be factored into that. But the fact remains that the percentage of Americans who own their own home is, I believe, is the lowest it's ever been. May have ticked up a little bit in the past year or two. So the most important cost, right? Absolutely, the two things: shelter, food. We all need it. So that's the biggest factor driving prices higher. Yes, maybe disposable income or household income is up, but if a higher percentage of that income is going to shelter than ever before, and you can't afford your own home, and I'm not clear we are better off. It would seem we're not. And quote free, unquote trade is a huge, huge factor in that. In the stagnant or declining real wages of tens of millions, probably 100 million or more Americans. So there you see home prices versus inflation. Why millennials can't afford homes? Because the cost of homes has outstripped even inflation. Generally, 240-242-5646, the phone number here. I'm over the hour. I didn't get to all my stories. I did not play the Pete video. I will play that probably tomorrow. I've got some stories for tomorrow. I want to talk about a so-called anti-Semitic incident or anti-Semitic graffiti in Montgomery County, Maryland, where I live. I don't believe it's anything of the sort. We'll focus more on how the Democrats have consistently betrayed poor, struggling, and working people and democracy itself. That's all coming up tomorrow. Don't forget, Friday, the free-for-all will have Carlos, friend of Halitics, Carlos Childs, joining us on Friday for the free-for-all. And that will do it for me. Thank you so much for being part of Halitics.